everybody. Kate Merrill here with John Keller and...
Wait a minute. You're not Chris McKinnon.
No, I'm not. I'm sitting in for Chris McKinnon this week.
Outside of the improvement, no one will notice the difference.
Chris is on yet another extravagant vacation, so good for him. But instead, I get to talk to you about, man, what a week, John.
Yeah.
This, again, a crazy week.
It never ends.
Never ends. And the big news this week, most recently, is now we know Joe Kennedy is going to challenge Ed Markey for that Senate seat.
He's making it official this weekend in East Boston. And yeah, look, this is going to be an amazing race. I was with Joe Kennedy a couple of weeks ago. We had an availability after the news that he was looking at the race surfaced. And I said, well, is this going to be a generational race? Kind of like the Ayanna Pressley-Mike Capuano race last year, remember that? And oh, no, that's not what it's about at all. Well, I'm saying yes, that is what it's about. Because, frankly, both men have strong records, legislative records that they can talk about. Their positions on issues are not, there's no obvious areas of conflict there. So it's going to be about, this 73-year-old baby boomer who's been around forever, very much of a creature of Washington, versus this 38-year-old young Kennedy who brings sort of fresh energy and a different generational perspective. I think that's almost entirely what this is going to be about, and turning out the vote. And one thing I haven't heard much talk about, Kate, is obviously next fall there's going to be a huge turnout. It's a presidential election year. But Kennedy running for the Senate opens up his seat in the 4th Congressional District. There's going to be multiple candidates running in that primary. That should help Joe Kennedy because that's where he's best known and, in theory, best liked. So that'll be an interesting battleground. But
Markey's pretty well liked as well. How do you see this breaking down? I know Kennedy is already polling ahead of him, but Markey's sort of a fixture around here.
He is a fixture. Again, I think that cuts both ways. We saw Mike Capuano last year use the experience card against Ayanna Pressley. Well, she's very nice and all, but if you get rid of me, you lose my seniority. I'm on these key committees. I'm tight with Speaker Pelosi. It didn't work. And I suspect that's a major hurdle for Ed Markey this time around. And, Ed Markey has been around a long time, generally well regarded, but the polling shows not all that well known in spite of all those years of service, and someone who has taken heat over the years for really not living in the state. Yeah, he maintains a legal residence for voting purposes, but he lives in suburban D.C. and always has. That may become a factor as well.
I'll be interested to see if anybody else jumps into this really hotly contested Senate. I feel like a lot of people feel like...
There already are a couple of other candidates who say they're going to run. The ballot doesn't become final till next spring, so we'll see.
All right, we'll see. The other thing that's big news this week is this distracted driving bill here in Massachusetts. What is going on, and why can't this happen?
This is a classic Beacon Hill situation where what would appear to most people to be a no-brainer. We know that we've developed in the era of the iPhone and the car as phone booth, an enormous problem with distracted driving. We have fatalities.
All you have to do is look outside your car while you're driving, and you see most people looking down at something, most likely their phones.
It's a nightmare.
It's a nightmare.
And so people say, well, why can't they just pass it? Well, it's more complicated than that. There have been a couple of sticking points that have emerged with this legislation that have divided the Senate and the House. One has to do with what's going to be done with the data on traffic stops for this. Police pulling you over for distracted driving. There have been concerns raised about racial profiling, how much of the data should be reported. Should it be reported only when there's a citation given or all stops? And that's controversial. Police have pushed back on the notion that they're going to have this whole nother administrative burden. They already feel like they've been overwhelmed by the anti-texting law that we got back in 2010. And then there have been concerns about what's going to happen to people who get cited. Multiple offenders, the legislation calls for them to have to pay a surcharge on their insurance, go to a re-education class. Some members of the legislature are opposed to that kind of thing. I think they will work it out, but listen, if you want fast action, Beacon Hill isn't the place to look.
Yeah, you want to stop texting and driving, you charge people $1,000 a time they're stopped, and I'll tell you, no one will be looking at their phone.
I'm all for that unless it's me who can. No, I don't do it anymore.
Exactly. All right, the other thing we're talking about, Trump and the gun situation.
Yeah.
You know, he sort of said he was for it, and now he's backing off it. So where do we stand, and what do you think the president's going to do about this issue?
Oh, boy.
Especially after this PSA comes out from the Sandy Hook parents. That's so emotional, sort of this PSA that's really tugging at everyone's heartstrings and really moving people forward.
Showing the trauma that kids go through now where they have to have the active shooter training. Look, with this president, you know, it's hard to predict, and yet the past, I think, is prologue. Remember, after Parkland, he gathered the Parkland parents in the White House, had a listening session, vowed to take action, actually said in a meeting that he was going to work with Democrats and push some of their agenda on this. Next thing you know, the NRA and some of his far right-wing supporters let him know, no, you can't do that, that we're going to bail on you if you do that, and he backs right down.
Right.
And I think we're seeing a similar cycle here in August after Dayton and El Paso. He said, we need tougher background checks. A couple weeks later, the background checks we have are plenty strong. Now he's pointing the finger at Beto O'Rourke for his comment in the debate about how, yeah, we're going to take your AK-47s away from you as a sign that, well, he's just undercutting. It's going to be really hard to make a deal now. I predict no deal.
Yeah.
And I predict a lot of backlash on that in the 2020 election.
Yeah, now Mitch McConnell's just saying, it's up to you. I'm not doing anything unless the president is going to back this. So now
this is why he's not going to send his members out to walk the plank on a vote that might be meaningless because of the president.
All right, John, crazy week yet again.
Great to talk with you, Kate.
Yeah, you too. Chris will be back next week. We hope he'll come back. All right, thanks for joining us, everybody.